Good morning. It's Thursday, November 13th. I'm Phil Streible, Chief Market Strategist at Blue Line Futures. So precious metals, they continue to surge overnight, and the ETF buyers, they are back. Silver prices are surging, rising back over the all-time highs that were seen last month, and on track for the best week in more than a year. So silver futures gained more than 5% yesterday and traded up to 54.41.5 overnight. That's your all-time high here, and have gained about 11% so far this week. Now, the last time we gained 10% in a week was last September when prices were trading right around $30. It's a strong demand from makers of solar panels, medical devices, as well as investors really worried about the FX currency debasement and also the high stock values. They really drove that rotation. So we saw yesterday an example of that rotation where we talked about where is the money going. We saw a big decrease here on Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies, and I believe that that's where some of that money was parked, looking for a quick snapback here, where Bitcoin futures traded back down to about that 101,000 before bouncing back up about 1.5% in the overnight session. But you look at silver really gaining on gold. I mean, futures are up about 80% so far this year, overtaking platinum, which was the top 2025 performing precious metals. So we're seeing the gold silver ratio drop down to about 78-1. Now, speaking of the gold market here, front month yesterday was up about $97. We got up to 42.04, and we're tacking on another $22 here overnight at 42.36 here last. Gold's been up about 3 out of the last 4 sessions, while silver's been up 4 out of 4. The number to watch on the gold market is up at 43.36. That was the high on Monday, October 20th. And that gold volatility is really continuing to rise at 25.82. So we dipped down to the 20 level. Now we're pushing up. And remember, volatility works both ways here. So you look at the average true range on both of these metals, you're going to see gold right around $90, silver right around $1.75. Now you shift to the equity markets, which are taking a little bit of a breather here with the end of the government shutdown all priced in. Markets are looking really for data releases while the clarity really remains foggy. So the S&P 500 down about 1/10 of a basis point at 68.65. That's down 10 points. The NASDAQ down about 0.2%, down 44 points at 25,580. So with the shutdown over, it could take some time here for normal operations to resume with the October jobs report, CPI report. They're just unlikely to be released at all, which is unfortunate because we were expecting a downtick on both of those numbers here, helping boost those odds where we see an interest rate cut over in December. So the swaps, they're betting the betting markets here from Polymarket. They're about even odds on a Fed rate cut next month. And then you got Boston Fed Collins and Atlanta Fed Bostic both say they're in favor of keeping interest rates steady to cool inflation. So Bostic, he also announced that his plans to retire at the end of his current term here in February. So we're going to have a big changeover in the Federal Reserve and the members there. So you look at the CME Fed Watch tool, and this comes after the assumption that we're not going to see that October CPI and also the jobs report here. We saw this big shift from the CME's Fed Watch tool. Markets are now only seeing about a 53.9% probability that the Fed will cut rates by 25 basis points at the December meeting, and that's down from 69.6 here last week. You look at Polymarket, big sell-off there. 72% chance we were going to cut rates. That was yesterday. Now it's down to a 56%. So you see the dollar index here just slightly lower. We're sitting at 99.25, down about 11 ticks here. And you got some green on the screen across a lot of the different FX components. Shockingly, the British pound is up about 16 ticks here at 131.47, perhaps getting a bit oversold. But if you look at UK economic growth, it continued to just come to a halt here in the third quarter, with GDP rising just 0.1% compared to 0.3% in the second quarter. You look at the 10-year yields, they're sitting at 4.09%. So that 10-year note just under that 113 mark. And that's been one of the positions that we've been looking at, is long on the 10-year note and then also long on the 10-year call spreads. We've also been looking at downside on many of the FX currencies here, like the euro, the pound, the Canadian dollar. Many people lifting that Canadian dollar short here about a week ago when it reached its 7-month low. You still can see Bitcoin volatility continue with an average true range here of about $4,700. So you get to Europe and Asia, European stocks and also Asian stocks, they rose for a 4th straight day here, supported by some gains here in China and Japan. Stocks in Australia fell after some unemployment figures, and then you get the MSCI index climbing about 0.5%. So that CPI is scheduled for release at 7:30. It's unlikely we're going to see it. The federal budget balance here due at 2 p.m. And then you got Fed's daily, Kashkari. You also have Hammock and St. Louis Fed president also speaking here today. So on the earnings front, out of 459 companies that have reported so far, 82% have managed to beat analyst forecasts. 15% have missed. And then when I talked about the ETF flows being back, so gold, you saw them at about 114,000 troy ounces, and those total gold ETFs up about 17% year to date. That's 97.3 million ounces. And gold's up about 60%. Year to date here, tacking on about 1.7% in the last session. You go to silver, it was a big boost here, 1.71 million ounces coming back in, up 14% here. Yesterday was up 13. And then you get real no action in platinum and palladium. And again, the gold silver ratio dropping to 78 to 1. So real interesting there here. So we'll see how today plays out. It's interesting when you get around these all-time highs. Remember, if you're going to try and pick a top on the markets, definitely want to work a stop loss, maybe even just a calculated risk put. But when you get these types of movements higher, it starts off with fundamentals of us moving up. Remember, it's like the solar panels, it's like the currencies are going down, and then all these markets, they end with the froth and the blow off tops here. Not saying there's a top in the market or anything like that. It's just you get the gamblers, the speculators, and the crowd really shows up. The Reddit crowd, the Wall Street bets, and those guys, and then things get really kind of crazy here. So, got any questions? Shoot an email, info@bluelinefutures.com. I'm still sick over here, barely talk. And remember that futures and options trading involves risk of loss, may not be suitable to all investors. Good luck, good trading.